Hello guys, welcome to Mindset Madness. You're probably here because you're experiencing difficulties getting the hard work done, right? Well, we've got the solution for you. In this video, we give you all the necessary tips to turn the hard work around completely. Stay tuned till the end as we reveal the #1 secret to crushing whatever tough work comes your way. First of all, we need to discuss a concept called neurotransmitters. Dopamine. Dopamine gives pleasure. Yet, that is not exactly what it does. Dopamine makes us crave things. This desire gives us the inspiration to lock in and work. On the off chance that you don't know how strong dopamine is, let us go over a couple examples to illustrate its effects. Example 1. Experiment on rats. Neuroscientists implanted electrodes at various points in the brains of a set of rats, who were then placed in a Skinner box. Whenever the rats would press the lever, they would receive a mild burst of electrical stimulation to their brains. Their result indicated that there were various areas in the brain where the electrical stimulation is rewarding, so the rats will press the lever frequently to receive this rewarding sensation. They basically loved the effect they got from it and how they felt because of the impulse. The rats did not eat or rest, they just kept pressing the lever until they were completely exhausted. Then, at one point, the cycle was turned around. The scientists blocked the release of dopamine in their mind's reward center. Therefore, rats turned out to be torpid, and they couldn't drink even a single drop of water, nor would they eat, and even more so, none of them were having sex. They didn't crave any of the normally enjoyable things. However, if the food was placed directly in their mouths, the rats would still eat. The animals didn't have the motivation to get up and do it themselves. You guys would think that both thirst and hunger motivates us to get food or water. But dopamine is equally responsible. In fact, the scientists were able to measure the increased release of dopamine in the reward pathways after the rat received the reward, and could therefore state that eating, drinking, and having sex was a workaround to get that amazing dopamine feeling. Example 2. Effects on human. Dopamine has a similar effect on humans. Any effect that releases too little dopamine would rather be skipped, and any type of effort that leads to that dopamine rush will gladly be done. You'll even want to repeat it over and over again. So, how is dopamine released? If there's a potential reward in any activity you're about to do, dopamine will be released. But if you anticipate that there is no immediate rewards with that activity, your brain won't release it. Alright guys, hang on for that next example. Example 3. Eating. Before you eat food that provides comfort, your brain releases dopamine because your brain would know that the food will make you feel amazing, even if it makes you feel worse. That's because the brain doesn't care if the dopamine activity is high or damages you. The highest dopamine release happens when you get a reward randomly. You don't expect it, so the effect is doubled. Example 4. Playing in a casino. Playing on a slot machine in a casino and getting a reward is an example of it. Even if you're losing money until that point, you expect to get a bigger reward. You just don't know when it could happen. In today's digital society, we are flooding our brains with unnatural amounts of dopamine daily, and we don't even know it. Scrolling through social media, playing video games, and even watching internet pornography are some of the most common things our generation gets pleasure from. Whatever it is we undertake, we feel like we'll be rewarded, and that alone gives us that dopamine high. It's basically a natural drug. That's why we're constantly checking our phones. We constantly check for notifications, and we expect that eventually we're going to receive a message, whether it's from that person you like or your best friend. We're becoming like those rats pulling the lever to get a new dopamine hit. Even though it sounds so innocent, it really isn't. We constantly want more to get that same effect as our bodies get used to the effects of dopamine. We'll go over this in a couple of seconds. Homeostasis. Our bodies have a biological system called homeostasis. Our body likes to keep internal physical and chemical conditions at a balanced level and adapts to it whenever an imbalance occurs. Okay, I get it. You'd like another example to illustrate this in further detail. Here we go. Example 1. Body temperature. Our body temperature falls when it gets cold outside and we start shivering due to chilled weather. Similarly, our body temperature rises when it's hot outside and we start sweating to lose some of that heat. Sweating means that our body is working hard to cool down. We want to get the heat out of our system and do so by giving off a salt fluid that we call sweat, and that's why it tastes so salty. Example 2. A drunkard. Similarly, a guy who rarely drinks alcohol will get drunk quickly, but a guy who drinks regularly will have a high tolerance. The latter won't black out as fast as the first one because his body is used to the quantities of alcohol he is consuming. This is actually quite dangerous, and the tolerance is built up quite fast. Make sure to always moderate with anything you do. Association of dopamine with homeostasis. Dopamine is quite similar to homeostasis. The brain gets used to having high levels of dopamine, and those levels become your new normal. Where 1 cup of coffee could wake you up in the morning 3 weeks ago, it has now turned into 2 cups, and you're barely up. The things that don't give you as much dopamine don't interest you any longer, and it can be a huge problem. It's much more difficult to motivate yourself to do them. They feel bored and less fun as they don't release as much dopamine compared to the things that do release it in high amounts. The excitement of the activity has basically cooled down. This is the reason that people prefer playing video games or browsing the internet rather than studying or working on their business. Once the dopamine tolerance gets too high, they simply aren't able to enjoy low dopamine behaviors. Is there anything that can be done to prevent this? The answer is yes, but for that, you need to perform a dopamine detox. Dopamine detox. You might have already guessed what a dopamine detox is. You'll have to set aside a day, and during that day, avoid all the highly stimulating activities. Stop yourself from providing any high amounts of dopamine and let your receptors recover. As fast as you got used to the high levels, you'll also be able to reduce the resistance. However, there is no scientific evidence to support this method, but we've seen that in many cases works for people who are addicted to coffee, soda, or any type of sugar and caffeine. Disclaimer: if someone is suffering from a drug addiction, then he or she should seek professional help, as they've probably formed a physiological and psychological dependence, and they don't want to experience any extreme withdrawal symptoms. Let's get back to the detox. Try to have a little fun as possible for a whole day. Don't use the internet or any technology like a phone or computer. Don't listen to music or eat any junk food. Remove all sources of external pleasure for an entire day. Embrace boredom, and trust me, there will be boredom. Do the following. Go for a walk. Be alone with your thoughts and think about your life goals. Write ideas on a physical piece of paper. This might seem quite intense. If you want thorough results, take radical action. One might ask the question, why would this even work, right? Eating extravagant dinners. Assume that you're eating every meal at the best cafe around. Those extravagant dinners turned into your new normal. Assuming somebody offers a bowl of plain rice, you would most likely decline. It wouldn't taste on par with your regular fancy dinner. On the off chance that you're abruptly abandoned in a remote location and you're starving, that bowl of plain rice will not appear to be so terrible, will it? This is what the dopamine detox does. It starves you of all the pleasure you usually get and makes those less satisfying activities more desirable. It resets your brain to rethink every single trigger that used to give you a dopamine rush. Dopamine detox in daily lives. If put simply, dopamine detox works because the boring stuff becomes more enjoyable. If someone does not want to starve themselves of all the pleasure, they can perform a smaller dopamine detox. Pick one day of the week and refrain from one of your high dopamine activities completely, even if the activity includes checking your phone, playing video games, eating junk food, or even watching internet pornography. Then, at that point, every week for one entire day, stay away from that action. You can do loads of other enjoyable things, taking it step by step. However, the action you pick is off limits. You will feel somewhat exhausted, but that's normal. You're resetting your brain, and that requires emotional and physical effort. But that's the point. Let your dopamine receptors recover from the unnatural measure of dopamine that has been cluttering your mind. Boredom will push you to try new things and different things. Some of them you would otherwise never have done. You're exhausted, and it's more straightforward for you to do them. Attempt to associate more dopamine with the things that will help you. Think long-term, and don't get sucked in by immediate gratification. Eating healthy doesn't make you happy straight away, but seeing your body turn into the beach body you've always wanted to does. Doesn't it? Find out what you want and write down the steps you need to undergo to get there. Accept that some of these steps aren't enjoyable, and they won't feel as good in the moment, but focus on the results you'll achieve when repeating them consistently. High dopamine activities. Your current high dopamine activities can serve as an incentive to pursue things that give you long-term benefits. In other words, you could use your high dopamine activity as a reward for completing difficult work. Personal experience. This is exactly what I do myself. I look out for all the difficult and low dopamine work I do. Cleaning my apartment, practicing the piano, reading books, doing some sort of exercise, etc. When I get a certain amount of work done, I reward myself with some type of high dopamine activity at the end of the day. The key words that I'll specify here are after and at the end of the day. If I get involved in high dopamine behavior first, then I won't be able to do the low dopamine work. I won't be motivated enough. That is why I always start with the difficult things first, and then I indulge in high dopamine activities. Rewards. For every hour of low dopamine work, I reward myself with 15 minutes of high dopamine activity at the end of the day. That means that for 8 hours of low dopamine work, I get roughly 2 hours of high dopamine behavior. These are my ratios. You can extend it if you want. Note that if you're addicted to something that's damaging your health, then you don't want to treat that behavior as a reward. Instead, find a different reward that's not as damaging, one that you still think is worth the effort. This is actually an extended version of one of our other videos discussing the perfect strategy to work smarter, not harder. We'll link it for you to watch. Guilt pleasure. If you're wondering what my guilty pleasure is, well, it's the internet. I easily get lost in the digital world for hours without doing anything else. That's why I've created this system for myself. I'm able to control my addiction through this system. But even with this system, I still plan days where I abstain from high dopamine activities completely. It's important to be aware of our weaknesses because in theory, they are our weakest points. We give ourselves over to the things we enjoy most, but it needs to stay reasonable, and you must be able to live a healthy and normal life without being fully dependent. Make a decision. I'll say that it is possible to make difficult things feel easier, but when your brain is getting an extreme level of dopamine all the time, you won't be as excited about working on something that doesn't release much of it. Many activities can become addictive over time. A bit of distance from social media, fast food, and mindless TV can have an overall positive impact on a person's mind and lifestyle. It'll feel tough at first, but you'll grow used to it after a couple of weeks once you feel the difference in your head and body. I'll tell you one thing, it's well worth it. If you have motivation problems, start dopamine detoxing your brain ASAP. Keep yourself away from the unnaturally high amounts of dopamine, or at least expose yourself to it far less frequently. Then, every day, low dopamine activities will become exciting again, and you'll be capable of doing them for longer periods. All of us are dopamine addicts to some extent. We're not saying it's always a bad thing, because we do experience motivation and progress towards our goals because of it. But the border is so damn thin. It's up to you to decide where you're going to get dopamine from. Are you going to get it from things that don't benefit you and harm you in the long run? Or are you going to get it from working on your long-term goals? The choice is yours. Well, that was all for today's video. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you want to learn more about being self-disciplined, watch our linked video about the 10 life hacks that will motivate you to do anything in life.